the opposite party was the enemy, and if they are going to try to kill you, you have to defend, you have to fight. So in the same fashion, the Quran mentions that when these unbelievers come to attack you, come to kill you, don't get scared, fight them. And if necessary, kill them, in context. Only those people who are fighting against you, not innocent people. So please don't quote out of context, please don't misquote. Regarding the last type of freedom of expression, that you can blame anyone, you can criticize anyone with solid facts. Again, they are subdivided into two types. Some facts are meant to be secret, some are not secret. Suppose a government official working in the American government, he tells all the details of the American Army, of the American Navy, of the American Air Force to the enemy. He is speaking the truth, mind you, with proof he is giving you, with photocopies, with photographs, with blueprints, all the secrets of the American government. Do you think the American government will give that person an award? If someone does that to same to the Indian government, do you think the Indian government will give that traitor an award? Will it give that person a Bharat Ratna? Surely not. It will hold him on trial and punish him. So such type of truths which are meant to be secret, if revealed, Quran is against. He is called a munafiq, a hypocrite. Come to the last type. That can you speak against, can you defame, can you criticize with proof, which is not a secret. Example, a government official in America speaks against the corruption of the government in America. Quran gives him full right. Quran encourages such truth to be told in public against falsehood. Such truth, Quran always agrees. And I started my lecture with ayat from the Quran. I'd like to end it with the same, which says, وَقُلْ جَعَلْ حَقْ وَذَاقَ الْبَاطِلِ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا وَمُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ الشِّفَاءُ وَرَحْمَةُ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَا يَزِيدُ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. Which means, when truth is hurled against falsehood, falsehood perishes. For falsehood is by its nature bound to perish. The Quran was revealed in stages, and it's a mercy and healing for the believers. As for the people of untruth, it is nothing but loss after loss. Thank you very much for a patient hearing.
That was quite a provocative speech, provocative in a very positive manner. It sets us thinking. And our last speaker is Mr. Ashok Sahani, who is the translator of Lajja into Marathi. Mr. Sahani, please.
Well, friends, apparently the problem seems to be that every religion has a book. And we, living in the pagan of the 20th century, will not be satisfied with the book that was written maybe 1,500 years back, or 2,000 years back, or 5,000 years back, as Dr. Vyas may claim, the hoary ancient times when the Vedas were compiled. So one would not be, one would be a bit puzzled if the last word has been said some 5,000 years back or 1,500 years back. I mean, of course, the journalists will not agree with this, because they have to bring out the issue every day. They are the dealers in words. So, I mean, it's difficult for a journalist, it's almost impossible for a journalist to conceal that the last word has already been said. Then, if the last word has already been said, what's he doing? What's he busy with? What's he writing? Now, to come to the point, Salman Rushdie had in an article written a long time back, I mean before he wrote the Satanic Verses, had stated that the politicians and the writers are in enemy camps, because they fight over the same territory. The territory is reality. The politicians would like the reality to be shown in a certain perspective, certain single perspective, at the expense of all other perspectives, possible perspectives. Whereas a literary person, an author, would like the reality to be presented from as many angles as possible. So the fight is between a certain official perspective and the possible unofficial perspectives. Now you may say that, this has been said about the politicians. It has nothing to do with the religious fundamentalists. But the politicians are just a shade lesser than the religious fundamentalists. They have their own ideology. And if they stick to their ideology, if they take the word of the ideology as the last word, then they're as bad or worse than the fundamentalists. We have the examples in Soviet Russia, a lot of examples for them. But now, if the journalists think that they are the dealers of the words, the supreme dealers of the words in today's world, then this episode of Taslima Nasreen is a pointer that the word doesn't belong to the journalist. The word belongs to the poet. As the poets from all times have claimed that the word belongs to them. The word does not belong to the legislators. The word does not belong to the founders of religions. The word belongs to the poet. And so the conflict has arisen when the Calcutta newspaper Statesman sent a correspondent to Taslima Nasreen in her sojourn in Calcutta on her way back to Dhaka from Paris and interviewed her. The poor journalist did not know the difference between Quran and Sharia. So Taslima was quoted wrongly, Taslima protested against it, and the letter was printed, and possibly the Statesman people thought that as good democratic gentlemen, we have settled the issue, but not so. Less than a month afterwards, the people in our country asked for the blood of Taslima. And the reason given is the interview that was published in the Statesman. I had imagined that the Indian newspapers will have the sincerity to say we are sorry. If somebody's life has been put into peril because of what a certain newspaper published wrongly, and it's freedom of expression also means that you have the freedom to say you are sorry. It's not like you are always in the right. You may not be always in the right. But that's not been done. And I think we have to think seriously. Suppose, for instance, for whatever reasons, Taslima loses her life. Her blood would be on the head of an Indian newspaper. And so also on the head of the fundamentalists, but also on the head of an Indian newspaper. Now you have to decide which one or who are the blocks, who are blocking the freedom of expression, the newspapers, the fundamentalists, or together both of them. For an unofficial practitioner of words, the poet, the newspapers and the fundamentalists, the largely circulated newspapers and the largely followed religions may not make much difference. There may not be much difference between them. That's all.
Sahani. We can now have the question and answer session. There are a couple of rules to be observed. The speakers will have to stand up, identify themselves, and give the name of their publication. Because I expect a fusillade of questions, I think it should be one question per person. The question preferably should be directed to one particular speaker. And as I mentioned before, please be brief and do not try to give the answer to your own question. That should be left to the four eminent gentlemen who enlightened us to a great detail. So, fire away. Yeah.
My name is Javed, and I'm not from any publication. I just happened to read your advertisement in Times of India. I thought I'll spend a good afternoon here. In any case, my question is directed to Mr. Dr. Zakir Naik. But before that, I want to clarify a point said by Mr. Sahani, who said that Taslima has been quoted wrongly. In any case, if you could see the 31st January 94 Time magazine issue reported by Mr. Fazan Ahmad, there she has said that the sun revolves around the earth. Okay, and I mean, how can we believe such unscientific thing if it is in the Quran? And secondly, she has said she has blamed Islam for the high rate of female infanticide in Bangladesh. I mean, I think these are. Is it in the Quran? Can you clarify?
Brother Javed has posed me two questions. It depends upon the chairperson whether he allows me to answer both or not. I will answer the.
He has the beginner's luck. So he has asked two questions. In future it won't be permitted. Only one question.
The first question he said was in the Time magazine, which happens to be one of the most authentic magazine in the world, one of the most authentic magazine. I do agree it was reported on the 31st of January that she said that Quran mentions that the sun revolves around the earth. And if we believe in such teachings, how can we progress? I do agree with the second statement. If we believe in such statements, how will we progress? But regarding the first part of the allegation, that the Quran mentions that the sun revolves around the earth, I want proof. Qul hatu burhanakum. Let us produce a proof. Where does the Quran say that? What she is referring to, brother, is mainly a verse in the Quran, in Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 33, which says, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ وَالشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. That it is Allah who has created the night and the day, the sun and the moon, each one traveling in its own orbit. The same thing is repeated in Surah Yasin, chapter number 36, verse number 40. كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. Each one traveling in an orbit with its own motion. The Quran does not say that the sun revolves around the earth. The Quran says the sun and the moon, each one traveling in its own orbit. The Arabic word used is yasbaha, coming from the root word sabaha, describing the motion of a moving body. If you say a man is doing sabaha on the floor, it means he is not standing. It means he is walking or running. If you say a man is doing sabaha in water, it does not mean he's floating. It means he's swimming. Same way, if you use the word sabaha for a heavenly body, it means rotating about its own axis. So the Quran mentions the sun and the moon rotate, they travel in a motion that they revolve and they rotate about its own axis. Now again, this verse had put me a little bit doubts, because I had passed my SSC, I had passed my ICSE, in 1982 from St. Peter's School. And there in geography I learned that the sun did not rotate. The sun revolved, fine, but it was stationary. It did not rotate about its axis. And the Quran mentioned that the sun rotates about its axis. So I was a bit worried. And then I had to do a little bit of research. And then I came to know that according to the recent advances in science and astronomy, we come to know that even the sun rotates about its axis. And to prove it, you can take equipment in the laboratory, and since you can't look at the sun directly, the image of the sun can be put on a tabletop. And the sun has got certain holes, like black spots. And that black spots take about 25 days to rotate completely. So in short, the sun takes about 25 days to rotate. So the Quran is not backward, it is more up to date. I want to ask Taslima Nasreen that who could have written this 1400 years ago, that the sun and the moon, وَالشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ, that the sun and the moon, each one travel in its own orbit, means revolving and rotating. Ask her. The Quran does not mention at all that the sun rotates or revolves around the earth. That's a misinterpretation. Since the chairman has given me permission regarding the second part of the question, and she has alleged that it is because of Islam that there is such a high rate of infanticide, female infanticide in Bangladesh. She alleged that. I want her to tell me, quote me one verse of the Quran which says that you should kill female children. In fact, according to the BBC report, in the program assignment, the title of that small clipping was Let Her Die. And a British reporter, Emily Buchanan, she came from America and she did a survey on female infanticides, and India happens to have the maximum number. And according to her, every day more than 3,000 fetuses are being aborted on being identified that they are females. 3,000 fetuses in our mother country. And if you multiply this by 365, more than 1 million fetuses on being recognized that they are female are being aborted. Why don't you read it in the headlines in our papers? Let the papers give it on the front page every day until this female infanticide is stopped. And according to the Tamil Nadu government report, out of the live births of female children, out of 10, 4 are put to death. 4 are put to death. It had to be a Britisher to come and tell us Indians what's the rate of female infanticide in our country. Now coming to the point, what does Quran speak about female infanticide? She cannot quote any verse. I challenge her to quote any verse from the Quran which says female children should be put to death. In fact, if you read Surah Takwir, see I'm going with quotation. Taslima Nasreen only says Quran says that, Quran says this. How can a layman who has not read the Quran, or even if he has read the Quran, where will he find which verse says this, what she's saying? So you have to take it for granted. Give benefit of doubt that the Quran does say that the sun rotates around the earth, or you have to agree that it believes in female infanticide. If you read the Quran in Surah Takwir, chapter number 81, verse number 8 and 9, it says that when the female child, when she's buried alive, and when she cries out, for what crime has she been killed? On the day of judgment, she'll cry out, for what crime she has been killed? So female infanticide has been completely forbidden in Islam. In fact, all sorts of female infanticides and killing of children has been prohibited. It's mentioned in Quran, in Surah Al-Isra, chapter number 17, verse number 31, as well as in Surah Anam, chapter number 6, verse number 51, which says, kill not your children for want of sustenance. It is Allah who will provide you and your children for sustenance. In fact, Quran rebukes the thought of a person rejoicing on the birth of a male child and his face being sad on the birth of a female child. It's mentioned in Surah Nahl, chapter number 16, verse number 58 and 59. Hope that answers the question, brother.
Father Pereira wants to say something on this particular issue.
I just want to make a general comment which I think is important at this stage. You often hear people say, oh, the Quran says this, which is an obscurantist thing. Oh, Hinduism says that, which is against progress. Oh, you can prove these things from the Bible and so on. Be very careful, firstly, when you hear things. Often these are vague statements made, as Dr. Naik has pointed very clearly, which have no reference at all. That's the first thing. Secondly, often religious scriptures are used by politicians and are used by obscurantists to support their own prejudices. Classic instance of racism and the Bible. You know that a lot of Western Christianity through the centuries has been racist, and they have used the Bible to defend it. It's absolutely false, but here it is politics which comes to use religion for its own purposes. Remember what I said at the beginning. Every religion has a liberative element which can emancipate you, but can also oppress you, depending on how these things have been twisted. So I make this general comment because often you hear statements like this and then they will blame, okay, Muslims, see, Muslims, what else? Or Christians, of course, Christians, or Hindus like this, or Sikhs, whatever. Be very careful because this is the typical kind of prejudice, actually, which only, as well, creates turbulence and does not help to clear any doubts.
More questions? Yeah, please.
Ista Settleworth from Communalism Combat, Dr. Zaki Nayak, wanted to ask him whether he considers the attack on Dr. Bedar for saying that Hindus are not kafirs but murtads by, he was threatened with his life. Was that a fundamentalist attack on his life and freedom of expression or not?
Please could you repeat the question? Please could you repeat the question? Dr. Veda.
Dr. Bedar.
Dr.
Dr.
Bedar.
Bedar of the Khudabakhsh Library was threatened with his life. His freedom of expression curbed when he said that Hindus are not kafirs but murtad.
Sister has posed the question that the person, Mr. Bedar, who said that Hindus are not kafirs and they are murtads. Therefore, is it right that the fundamentalist that threatened his life, is that a curb of freedom of expression or not? And life. Again, 2-3 questions. Regarding the first part, that whatever that Mr. Bedar said, that Hindus are not kafirs, but they are murtads, does not have any base, because he may not be well versed in the Arabic language. What is the meaning of kafir? I told you that kafir means a person who conceals the truth or rejects the truth. It does not mean that a kafir has to be a Hindu. He can be a Hindu, he may not be a Hindu. I will come to the complete answer. So only if I justify the meaning can I justify my answer, sister. If I don't justify the meaning, my answer will have no relevance. Because Quran always says, Qul hatu burhanakum, produce your proof. While giving your answer, give your proof. Without proof, I don't give comments. So firstly, kafir does not mean a Hindu. It may be a Hindu, may not be a Hindu. And what is the meaning of murtad? Murtad is a Muslim who, after he has accepted the faith, he converts to another faith. That's called a murtad. So, Mr. Bedar's explanation has got no relevance at all. Neither is it correct literally. It does not have neither a head nor a tail. Regarding whether those Muslim people, first, were they fundamentalists or not, I don't know. Were they right in putting a death sentence? I would say without proof, no one has the right to put a death sentence. If they gave an opportunity to clarify himself, and if he falters, or if he had abused the Quran, then it's a different question. If he was not able to clear, depending upon what proof did Dr. Bedar give to those Muslim students. Otherwise I would say that without any proof, if those Muslims have called for his death, it is completely wrong. It's against Islam. Hope that answers the question, sister.
Can anyone call for a death sentence except the High Court judges?
Fine, you can ask me a question. I thought my answer was over. The second question, I'll give a second answer. If it's based on truth, does a person have a right to pass a death sentence? It is like you asking me if the Indian government has proof that a person who has told the secrets of the country, of the army, of the navy, of the air force, has told to somebody else. And if he's caught and it's proved that he actually betrayed the country, the Indian government will punish with proof. Same way, if there is proof that he has betrayed or spoken something wrong, if there's proof, then I feel he requires punishment. Hope that answers the question. That's the second part of the question. Is it death sentence? Or if you say first part, no problem. Can you give death sentence? See, every crime, the punishment given are various. Like for example, if you read in the trains, if you pull the chain without any reason, 500 rupees fine and 3 months imprisonment. So if you're caught, one judge may give you 500 fine, the other judge may give you 500 fine and 1 month. Some judge may give you only 3 months, some judge may give you both. The punishment differs from each judge to each judge. Regarding what does religious fundamentalism talk about if someone blasphemes You haven't used that word, but I'm using it. Someone blasphemes. What does the Quran say? I quote the Quran. The Quran in Surah Maida, chapter number 5, verse number 33 states that the punishment for anyone who wages war against Allah, like against God Almighty and His Messenger, or strives, does jihad, strives with might and main, to create mischief in the land, his punishment is either execution or crucifixion or chopping off of limbs of the opposite side or exile. This is the law given in one verse of the Quran. Other verses say that if possible, you speak with Udu ila sabili rabbika bil hikmah wal mau'izatil hasna wajadilhum billati ya ahsan. It is said in Surah Nahl, chapter number 16, verse number 125. Invite all to the way of thy Lord with wisdom and beautiful preaching, and argue with them, and debate with them, and reason with them in ways that are best and most gracious. If you ask me, what would I do to Taslim Nasreen? Since Quran gives so many options, I would say I would call her for a public debate. That depends upon the judge. The punishment may differ on every judge. Every punishment, if enough proof is given, if you read, since you asked, the topic is religious fundamentalism, if you refer to the Bible says, and Father can correct me if I'm wrong, in the third book of the Old Testament, in Leviticus, chapter number 24, verse number 16, it states that any person who blasphemeth the name of thy Lord, he should certainly be put to death. Certainly be put to death. And the congregation, Father, if you want the Bible is available here. If you think I'm misquoting, I'm quoting verbatim. Father, from whichever version you want, whether the King James version or the New Way version. I'd like to complete the quotation. If you're a fundamentalist Christian, you have to follow the Bible. The Bible says in Leviticus, chapter number 24, verse number 16, that anyone who blasphemeth the name of thy Lord, he shall certainly be put to death. And all the congregation shall surely stone him, even the stranger. For anyone who's born in the land and blasphemeth the name of the Lord, he shall be put to death. So if you're a good Christian, what does the Bible say? Anyone who blasphemeth the Lord, he should be put to death. There may be other options also given in the Bible, but this is one of them.
Father Pereira has something.
It's an important point, so let me give you a slightly different point of view. There's such a thing in the world as mob justice or rough justice or lynching. You're familiar with these terms. In the United States, for example, for many years, even until very recently, if you were a black, a group of white men could just say, he tried to rape my daughter, and they would lynch you on the spot. So in the same way, please realize that there's such a thing as rough justice, and a lot of this is taking place sometimes in Islamic countries. I have here a report on which comes in from Pakistan, and the title is Blasphemy Laws Are So Vague That Anyone Can Be Murdered. I can give this to anyone if you want to make Xerox copies of it. It's unfortunate. Probably the only country in the Muslim world right now that has enough of ulema to handle these cases against the Shariat is Iran. That's why you never hear cases of this in Iran. But many other instances where you appeal to the Shariat or you appeal against to an interpretation of the Quran, and you find invariably that Maulana are much too politicized, and a lot of this thing comes from politics. So therefore to say that Islam is responsible again is wrong. You've got to see the political context of a country, like Bangladesh for example, like Pakistan for example, like Algeria for example, the Islamic Salvation Front and other places like this. So this is very important to keep in mind. The instances of Dr. Bedar, etc. is what you'd call mob justice. I don't like you, you've blocked him, come out, I'll kill you. And this is what they do, you're killed. Who has the right to execute? Only the state, after a due process of trial. The trouble is, in many countries, the democratic process is so weak, and we find this so in Bangladesh today. There's a fighting going on between the Prime Minister and the other opposition leader, between Zia and Hasina. And this is one reason why these things are taking place. Now they're coming out and say, no, don't ever threaten the woman, otherwise be careful. Note that the Maulana who has put that reward of 50,000 takas has not yet been arrested. There are 3 persons who have put rewards upon the head of Taslim, but there's only the public notification has gone out that action can be taken, but no one has taken action yet. You see, many of these things do happen. And recently you had a case, probably you picked it up in the papers, an Ayatollah Khamenei, I think, said that one Ayatollah can issue a fatwa which negates the previous fatwa. Why is it taking such a long time to say this? Why is it taking such a long time? In politics, you know from your own study of the whole Salman Rushdie case that the reason why Ayatollah Khomeini issued that fatwa was entirely political. You know it. So don't make Islam a scapegoat for the tricks of politicians. Don't make that. Christians have done this, plenty of examples of that. Hindus have done this, plenty of examples of that. Muslims are doing it, plenty of examples. Sikhs have done it, all right. You always have this kind of continual tension between religion and politics, and one will use the other. I'll give you plenty of examples from Christianity if you are patient to wait the evening. Plenty of examples. You see? So it's important to keep these two things in mind. Rough justice, one thing, and there's no way in which we can excuse this kind of thing. But unfortunately, governments are too weak to enforce it, and that's why you have what you have.
Mr. Wagle.
डॉक्टर नायक ने डिबेटिंग स्किल्स तो बहुत सारे दिखाए हैं. मैं उनसे हाँ या ना में जवाब चाहता हूँ. तस्लीमा के खिलाफ जिन लोगों ने फतवा इशू किया, उस अमानवी फतवे का आप समर्थन करते हैं या निषेध करते हैं? Only one word.
Brother had asked me the question that do I agree with the death sentence given by certain people, whatever it is, maybe 2, 3 or 4, do I agree with the death sentence given on the head of Taslima Nasreen? In one word, believe me brother, I'm a Muslim fundamentalist. And Islam, my fundamentals of Islam do not allow me to give the answer in one word. Do not allow me. That's right. I'm telling you, I will not answer. Because I will have to call her in the court of law. And after I've examined her, after I've integrated her, and after she's given an equal opportunity to support herself, after she has been given an equal opportunity to support herself, can the death sentence be passed? Otherwise, no, I have not met her. I have not met her. If you have contacts, you can get in front of me. I can't. Islam does not give me the permission, brother. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm not exactly a full-time journalist, but Dr. Naik, do you think the people who have given this punishment, announced, pronounced, whatever, have given her that opportunity?
Brother has asked the question that have those people who have passed the death sentence, have they given her opportunity to clarify herself? I don't know. I don't know. Believe me, I don't know. Maybe, may not be. I don't know. I read in the papers, the news keep on altering. No, see, I'm speaking the truth. How do I know? I don't know personally. I read in the papers. In one paper it mentions she's 29 years old. One paper she's 31. One paper says 39. One paper says she's a plain MBBS doctor. The other paper says she's a gynecologist. The other paper says anesthetist. You ask me what is she, I say I don't know.
डॉक्टर व्यास से पूछना चाहता हूँ कि बहुत सारे डॉक्टर नायक से हुए, इनसे पूछना चाहता हूँ कि इन्होंने हिंदू धर्म के बारे में बहुत सारी बातें कही, सनातन हिंदू धर्म के बारे में, और हिंदू धर्म में रिफॉर्म्स हुए क्योंकि हिंदू धर्म का सनातन हिंदू धर्म का मन बड़ा उदार था, इसे उन्होंने कहा. मुझे उनसे इतना ही पूछना है कि जो चारवाक से लेकर फुले आगरकर तक सारे रिफॉर्मिस्ट हुए, उन्हें जो तकलीफें झेलने पड़ी, वो हिंदू धर्म के उदार मन की निशानी है या नहीं?
चारवाक से कहां तक?
अभी आज तक भी लीजिए आप.
इसका सीधा उत्तर यह है, मैंने पहले अपने वक्तव्य में कह दिया था कि वैचारिक विरोध के आधार पर शारीरिक कष्ट किसी को दिया जाए, इसका पहला उदाहरण गांधी हत्या का है. चारवाक को हम लोग बृहस्पति का अवतार मानते हैं.
सावित्रीबाई फुले पर भी पत्थर फेंके गए थे. गांधी हत्या पहला उदाहरण नहीं है, शंभुक का भी पहले उदाहरण है.
हाँ,
आगरकर की तो शव यात्रा निकाली गई थी.
देखिए, ये सारे उदाहरण अंग्रेजी शिक्षा के आने के बाद के हैं, इसलिए इन सब की जिम्मेदारी मैं अंग्रेजी शिक्षा को मानता. एक शंभुक का उदाहरण आप छोड़ दीजिए, मैंने कहा वैचारिक विरोध के आधार पर वैचारिक विरोध का जहां तक चारवाक का आपने नाम लिया, आप इतिहास में कहीं बता सकते हैं?
फिजिकल टॉर्चर तो हर रिफॉर्मिस्ट को किया गया है।
आप मुझे बताइए चारवाक पर कौन से अत्याचार है और आप किस इतिहास के आधार पर?
आप शंभू के बारे में थोड़ा सा एक्सप्लेनेशन दीजिए।
पहले आप चारवाक को वापस ले लीजिए, मैं शंभू का उत्तर दूं।
हर रिफॉर्मिस्ट को फिजिकल टॉर्चर किया गया है आज तक। जो जहां तक मैं अयोध्या तक बोलता हूं कि अयोध्या के बारे में बात करने वाले जो लोग हैं और हिंदू धर्म में जो खराब नीतियां है या खराब अंधश्रद्धाएं है उनके खिलाफ बोलने वाले आज के जो आज तक के नए नौजवान हैं अंधश्रद्धा निर्मूलन समिति के, उनको भी फिजिकल टॉर्चर का सामना करना पड़ा है। यही मैं आपको कहता हूं, क्योंकि ये आपकी बात सच नहीं है कि रिफॉर्मिस्ट को कोई तकलीफ नहीं दी गई और सिर्फ डिबेट चलाया गया या डायलॉग चलाया गया। फिजिकल टॉर्चर तो हुआ ही है और इसके तो इतने सारे उदाहरण हैं, आप इतिहास पढ़ के वो निकाल सकते हैं।
आपने चारवाक से प्रारंभ किया, मेरी आपसे प्रार्थना, या आप बोले या मैं बोलूं, मेरी आपसे प्रार्थना है कि चारवाक को किस प्रकार का कष्ट दिया गया ये आप किसी इतिहास के आधार पर हमें बता दीजिए, तो मैं आपके प्रश्न का उत्तर देने का या अपने विचार को सुधारने का दोनों प्रयत्न करने के लिए मैं तैयार। आई एम ऑलवेज ओपन फॉर रेक्टिफिकेशन एंड करेक्शन। तो कोई मुझे बता दे कि चारवाक के इतिहास में कहाँ ये मिला हुआ है, या कम से कम आप स्वीकार करेंगे चारवाक को नहीं दिया गया कोई भी शारीरिक दंड, बाद में हुआ।
चारवाक इतना लंबा जाने की जरूरत ही नहीं है ना। ज्ञानेश्वर है, तुकाराम आहे, मालूम नाही क्या किया, ज्ञानेश्वर आहे, तुकाराम आहे, ज्ञानेश्वरानं वाईट टाकलं, तुकारामाला तर काय केलं, चारवाक पर्यंत जायचं कशाला?
मैं इस आक्षेप से सहमत नहीं हूं कि चारवाक का इतिहास मिटा दिया गया है, क्योंकि चारवाक को आप कृपा करके शांति से विचार कीजिए। चारवाक को हम लोग बृहस्पति का अवतार मानते हैं और चारवाक के नास्तिकवादों के जो सिद्धांत हैं वो बराबर तब से आज तक चले आ रहे हैं। और जहां तक मेरी भारतीय इतिहास की जानकारी है वहां तक चारवाक को या उनके अनुयायियों को, जैसा कि मैंने कहा, अंग्रेजी शिक्षा प्रणाली आने के पहले तक वैचारिक विरोध के आधार पर कोई उनको तकलीफ दी गई हो ऐसा मेरी जानकारी में अब तक नहीं है। अगर आप प्रमाणों के साथ कोई बात दें तो मैं या तो उसका उत्तर दे सकूंगा या मैं अपने विचार सुधार सकूंगा, मुझे इसमें कोई आपत्ति नहीं है।
अच्छा,
शंभू पर अगर आप चाहें।
The speaker I think has made his stand quite clear. I think we should go for other questions.
My name is Javed Anand. I'm from Communalism Combat. Dr. Nayak has said repeatedly that the punishment for any crime depends on the gravity of the crime, and he has specifically talked about the American state and once about the Indian state, and saying for treason, if any official of the government of India, employed by the government of India, or any official employed by the government of the United States reveals the secrets of the states which compromise the integrity and sovereignty of that state, then he should be punished to death. And is there anything wrong in that? Or there has to be some punishment that follows. That is my impression. I stand corrected.
Yes.
Having said this, he then proceeds to make the point that Taslima Nasreen, for example, he says that there are so many contradictory reports in various papers that he can come to no conclusion whatsoever. Maybe he is also in doubt as to whether any Maulana has or has not passed a fatwa against Taslima Nasreen. But it seems to me that contained in that argument also is that if Taslima Nasreen has said anything against the Quran, because that is her firm belief, just as it is the firm belief of many other people that Quran is the word of Allah, then she can be tried by numerous authorities, including by Dr. Zakir Naik himself. If Taslima Nasreen were here today, he will know her age, he will know whether she is a gynecologist, whether she believes in Islam, etc., etc. At the end of which he can pronounce some punishment for her, which could also mean chopping off opposite limbs or head or exile. Those four options is given. Now, if there are to be many centers of jurisdiction, I mean many people, whether it's a mullah or a pandit or a Shankaracharya or a pope or whatever it is, who can simultaneously decide what crime for what punishment, then I have a question. I come from the district of Allahabad, from a village in Allahabad, where there's a mosque in which I have prayed for many years during my years. I know for a fact, most of us Muslims know for a fact, as also the Hindus of the village, that in that mosque on the outer boundary there are statues which could only have come from some temple or another. If some Pandit from my village in Allahabad decides that a temple was destroyed here a few hundred years back or whatever it is, and for that crime that Pandit sitting in that village decides that the Muslims of that village be killed and all the Hindus killed, all the Muslims or as many Muslims as they can, is there something wrong with it? Is this what he is suggesting?
if he asks, please repeat the question, it is going to be very difficult.
Well, I'll summarize it. Can there be many centers? Can there be many centers of decision making in terms of what constitutes crime and what is punishment?
Brother, thank you for the short speech. In your short speech, you have asked at least 10-15 questions, if not more. Whatever I can remember,